Welcome to the Myth and Magic Authors Podcast, folklore and fantasy topics aimed at creative storytellers. To write stories and challenge your brain with exciting ideas, delve into these presentations and reflections. See how fantasy realms are based on actual world history, legend, and lore. Study fairy tales, nature fables, and supernaturalism to engage in a jumble of concepts that will trigger your fancy and get you writing imaginatively. Now, here's your host, Neil Mack.
Hello, fantasy fiction fans, and welcome to another edition of Myth and Magic, the podcast for fantasy authors. So this week I'm going to be discussing how elves will help us understand the objective reality of things that we cannot see. But first, I want to talk a little bit about exercises for your writing mind. And I want to think about warm-up exercises to get you kick-started into your writing day. So here goes. A marathon runner doesn't put her shoes on and run 26 miles, if you think about it, does she? A marathon runner takes time to warm up before her race. She does her stretches, and she probably scoffs a banana and she sips some water. She checks that her laces are tight and she has all of her required gear with her. She tells her family where she's going, and then when she's sure she's ready to go, she starts at a gentle pace to make sure all of her joints and all her tendons are relaxed and are painless. It probably takes about a mile or so in the race before she gets into her stride. And it's the same for you as a writer. If you're venturing into a novel, then you'll know that you must write at least 50,000 words. That will probably be maybe 2,000 words a day. So it's best to do your stretches before you head into your long endurance race. And it's best to start at a gentle pace so you can be sure that all your joints and all your tendons are relaxed before you get into your stride. And while this all sounds metaphorical, because of course it is, don't forget though that writing and its bigger and its brainier sister, ideation, I-D-E-A-T-I-O-N, are both profoundly grueling and exhausting activities. They are physical, and you'll feel totally depleted after a long session of writing. But anyway, here's a few warm-up exercises that will help you energise your uphill writing slog. These are the things that I do before I start on my day's writing, and perhaps they might be useful for you too. Number 1, strengthen your flexors. Now, it's an easy one, this. There are about 170,000 words in the English language. A high school student will recognise and explain the meaning of about 10 to 12,000 words. This increases to around 17,000 words as a college student and around 20,000 words as a well-read senior. What that means, of course, is we use just a tiny fraction of all the available words. As a writer, and I think you know what I'm going to say next, as a writer, you owe it to yourself and to your audience to be a logophile and to always be on the lookout for new and clever ways to explain yourself. Plus, the new words that you use don't even have to be sesquipedalian. Some very simple and very useful words may be small, but they will be mysterious. To help me learn some new words and to encounter new words, on some mornings I use a thing called the word generator, and it's at www.wordgenerator.net. Or perhaps for a change, because change is good, I use the random word generator, and it's RADOMWORD, randomword.com. If you use one of these word generators, what it does is you just press a button and it just comes up with a new word. Sometimes that new word you will be familiar with, but don't forget there are 170,000 words in the English language, so most often or not it will come up with one which you've never heard of. To maximise the retention of that new word, I would recommend that you say it out loud several times and then try to find a sentence into which it can be placed. My second warm-up exercise is to prepare your propulsive cadences. Long-distance writing, like long-distance running, is about finding a rhythm. Now, some call this getting into the groove, and it makes sense. So here's an easy way to prepare your syncopation ready for your day's writing. First of all, I want to ask you a question. Have you already prepared a mixtape of your favourite dynamical sounds? If you haven't, then I eagerly suggest that you do that right now. You can easily make a song list on SoundCloud and Spotify or elsewhere. But let's say that you've already got a playlist on Spotify, something which you'd like go to before you start writing. Select one of your get up and go songs from that list. So it should be a song, it can't be instrumental, and type in the song title and perhaps artist and search for the lyrics. So for example, I'll give you an example. If you enjoy a song called Get Up and Go and it was by the Go-Go's and you like this one in the morning, and why not, it's a good song to inspire and motivate you, go find the lyrics of Get Up and Go by the Go-Go's, and then what you'll do is you'll choose probably 2 lines, no more than 3, 2 lines that mean something to you right away, something which impact on you right away. So after I searched for the Go-Go's song, I saw this line that they'd written. The words you say don't mean a thing, they fly right by my eyes. The words you say don't mean a thing, they fly right by my eyes. It's got syncopation, hasn't it? It's got rhythm. It's a line of 8 beats followed by a line of 6 beats. So now, and this is the bit where you have to put your thinking cap on, you try to come up with a comparable rhyme. So 2 lines, one with 8 beats and one with 6 beats. And perhaps try to take the idea that hit you in the face when you first read that out. And for me, it was the words fly by my eyes. So the idea of flying words is a little bit odd, so I like it. So take that idea a little bit further, take that concept a little bit further. So with my newly thought up, newly created line, I said, the voice within my head buzzes, bites me like a sawfly. The voice within my head buzzes, bites me like a sawfly. I wrote a simple line, 8 beats followed by 6 beats. Of course, I tried to generate some strong emotions in my tiny little one-line rhyme. I didn't just write gobbledygook. And maybe I hinted at conflict. It bites me, my head buzzes. But let's remember that this is just a stretching exercise. It took me about 10 minutes to do, and that's in its entirety, from searching for the lyric, reading the lyric, and then writing my own line. If it takes any longer than 10 minutes, then it won't be, of course, an exercise. It will be a full-blown session. So make sure that it's really no more than 10 minutes, although I must tell you that it might take a little bit longer to set the exercise up at first. But once you start using this regularly, every other day perhaps, or maybe every day, then it will be easy and fun to do. And it also has a side benefit of producing some fancy lines that you can share on your social. My third warm-up is to stretch your improvisational hamstrings. Improvisation is a key skill for a writer. But how does your spontaneity feel today? Some days my spontaneity, I admit, feels flat. On other days my spontaneity feels brilliant. But how do you fire up your originative processes on flat days? Well, the best thing you can do, in my opinion, is take your brain away from words and away from writing for at least 10 minutes, but no more than 20. Sometimes I do a real physical stretch, really physically do some stretching on my yoga mat, or I do 10 minutes on my rowing machine. And you'll know probably that cardio is good for a tired brain. It flexes a tired brain. If you don't have a rowing machine, then try a treadmill or an exercise bike or old-fashioned weights, or just jog on the spot. I also like to take time to fix a hot drink, and I make my coffee the old way. In other words, I grind beans, I put the pot on the stove, and I do it in that lengthy way because it requires mental effort and it tests my senses and my coordination. Or I make a pot of tea, and I also do that the old-fashioned way. I use proper tea leaves, and I use a proper teapot, and it's a ceremony. And I think that's important to keep your senses and your coordination working. Or I might tidy up a bit of art, because I like to do a little bit of art. I create some art in the evenings after my working day. Or I tidy up a photograph that I've taken the previous day, because images need to be cropped and processed. But whatever it is I do it for 10 minutes. And those 10 minutes are away from keyboards, screens, words and writing. So take your 10 minutes away from words, but do something that is creative. Now, interestingly, and I suppose this is a bit counterintuitive, but this is what I found. I found that the more routine I make that 10-minute exercise, the thing I call a wordless creative blip, by the way, the wordless creative blip, the more routine it is, i.e. making the coffee or doing my stretching or doing the rowing machine, I find it helps my synapses become more yielding and more amenable. And I think it makes my synapses become more flexible and more compliant, because I think what you're doing is you're focusing on smells and on touches and on tastes and on seeing and on hearing things, and you're coordinating with parts of your body that you won't be using for the rest of the day, most likely. So in that fact, you're contacting all of your senses, which I think helps you to write more meaningfully and more imaginatively once the writing day starts. There's 3 tips, some warm-up exercises for your writing mind. I'll just finish this part by giving you a quote from Nelson Mandela, because if you think any of that is a little bit difficult for you, remember these words: it always seems impossible until it's done. How do elves help us understand the objective reality of things we cannot see? On Myth and Magic episode 76, which aired on April the 7th, 2021, I talked about how to build belief in your characters, belief in your plots, and even belief in your author brand. And I think that belief and belief building is an indispensable component of fantasy fiction. And as a fan of fantasy fiction, you're most likely an enthusiast and an appreciator of elves and the elfin race. But did you know that elves help us understand the objective reality of things that we cannot see? In other words, elves contribute to our understanding of belief in hidden things. In Old Norse, these creatures, or elemental constructs, if you like, that we know as elves, E-L-V-E-E-S, were actually earlier called Hulder, H-U-L-D-E-R, Hulder, also spelled H-Y-L-J-A. Hulder means the hidden ones. Hulder means the veiled ones. Hulder is a very ancient word, and it stems from Hilja, which means to hide. So in other words, the ancient Norse people believed that there were supernatural beings that shared our world, even though they were hidden from us. I suppose if you encountered an ancient Norse person and they had any notion of time and space, and who's to say they didn't, by the way, but if they had any notion of time and space, they might have said that the Hulder inhabit an alternate dimension, and that the Hulder could travel across the threshold of that dimension, which they did infrequently and fleetingly, and enter into our world, perhaps to disrupt and to cause harm. If elves cannot be seen because they are hidden, and they cannot be experienced because they inhabit an extrasensory world, then how can anyone believe in their existence? Do you believe in their existence? Do you believe in elves? I suppose you could ask the same question about ghosts and about gods and about cryptids and about demons and about angels. But all those do have some evidence, which I'll go into in a second. But for elves, the commitment to believe in them is even more intriguing, and I think even more complicated, because you're faced with the basic principle about elves. In fact, it's the essential ingredient about elves. They are undetectable, they are imperceptible, and they are unknowable. They are hyperphysical in the sense that they exist beyond any physico-chemical senses. Ghosts come out and spook us. Gods inspire us and they bring us emotion. Cryptids are occasionally witnessed. Demons bring ill luck. Angels bring tidings. But elves, by their very nature, remain hidden. That is their essential ingredient. However, when enough people believe in a reality, whatever the reality is, but in this case elven reality, then those same beliefs have a real and a tangible effect on the actual non-fictional world. And it's at this stage of believing, in this case believing in elves, that we can understand that they become part of our shared world view. And so they have a genuine place in our social reality. To explain this, because it's a little bit difficult to get your head around, to explain this, take the old English etymon for elf, which was A-E-L-F, elf, or sometimes Y-L-F. Ancient people, by the way, often used the words elfis, E-L-P-H-I-S, or elfin. Go through a map or a search directory and see if you can find any real place names of actual places where one of those ciphers, A-E-L-F, Y-L-F, or elfis or elfin, is hidden within. If you can, it possibly means that elves did become at one stage associated with that real place. So they formed part of the social reality of the real world because people named their places after them. Now, I've found some examples. There's Alvingham in Lincolnshire, England. There's Ulverston, which was originally called Alfriston in South Gloucestershire. And there's Eldon Hill in the Peak District, Derbyshire, which was first known as Elvedon, E-L-V-E-D-O-N, in 1285. You'll be able to find your own. And likewise, there are many ancient forenames or hereditary names that included the idea of elfdom. And here are some real ones. Alfwine literally means elf friend. Alfric, which you probably have heard before, literally means elf powerful. Alfreward literally means elf guardian. And Elfwaru literally means elf carer. I'll put those words up on my show notes on my site at neilmach, neilmach.me. Elves impacted onto our real world because the words became connected with actual places and the words became connected with actual people. Furthermore, something that has no tangible quality or material value can nonetheless stimulate a sense of pride or enormous respect or enormous worth. So Alfric means the elf powerful and Alfuro means the elf carer. There was a pride and respect connected to being a friend of elves. But going back to that idea that something with no tangible quality or even material value stimulates respect, pride and worth, if enough people believe in it, there's a good example of that, and we see it all the time. It's the national flag. Just think of the feeling, the, if you like, passionate feeling that a national flag awakens. But another example, which I think is a great example, is the £5 note or the $5 bill. In reality, these things are just pieces of paper. Their net worth is about nothing. It's less than nothing. But these pieces of paper represent some time that's been invested, or some output that's been earned, or some value that's been traded. They represent something even though they're not something. So a $5 bill or a £5 note is a real and valuable thing, and it has a tangible benefit, but only because everyone believes in what it stands for. Do you understand that? It only has a tangible benefit because everybody believes in it, and elves are the same. They only have a tangible benefit if everybody believes in them. They represent something we understand. More people believe in the idea of elves than the people who don't. The more folk that believe in the absoluteness of something's existence creates belief. So even though an elf can't be seen or even reside in our dimension, there's an absoluteness about their existence because there's enough people who believe in them. And therefore, like a flag or like a banknote, elves have become part of and will always be part of our objective and our shared reality. It's also interesting to contemplate, by the way, that a society that believes in the possibility of a hidden race of different peoples, a type of person that hides themselves away in another dimension far away from us, perhaps do this as a society so they can metaphorically think about real-life ethnic others. These thoughts can be positive or they can be negative, but at least the society is thinking about the possibility of other tribes beyond their scope, or other nations beyond the seas, or other ethnic groups beyond their imagination, as they try to find their place within a larger universe. It's also worth acknowledging that our shared beliefs about elves and their social role within our real world have varied across time and space. Once upon a time, elves were identified with demons, and in fact the earliest Christian prayer book used the word elf to mean Satan, while some ancient folklorists defined the creatures as divinities of light, so they thought of them as demigods. Some people thought that elves caused disease, it was called elf shot, while many others thought that elves raped people and stole their babies. By the way, if you got elf shot, it means that you were hit by little arrows sent by an elf, and this is the idea of, we think, elves can fire bow and arrow. The romantic concept of a noble elf only entered into literature in Elizabethan England, and even then they were considered to be creatures that you would want to avoid if you could. Much later indeed, elves were depicted as positive, although they were always, of course, moralistic and somewhat haughty. So the elves in Tolkien's world, Legendarium, were moralistic and somewhat haughty, but at least they were positive. But I ask you this, how much does Legolas equate with the satanic child abductors of earlier years? Well, not much. Our social view of elves has changed as we have changed. Now compare Legolas with extraterrestrial aliens, and I think a good place to start is the humanoids known as Vulcans that appear in these Star Trek shows and in the movies. I think that's a good place to start. Think about how many people believe in aliens, and think about how many people believe in alien abductions and UFOs and Area 51, etc. And then ask yourself this, are extraterrestrial, interdimensional, invisible aliens just elves by another name? I'm going to leave you with an extract from the Southern English Legendary, which was written in 1270, and it's this. Alone in some hidden places they stand then very still. They that are called the Eluen are from among the ghosts. If you want to talk about the elfin race, it's the Elfsin. If you want to talk about elves, it's the Elfish. If you want to talk about a mountain elf, it's the Borgelfen. If you want to talk about a field elf, it's the Fildelfen. If you want to talk about a wood elf, it's the Woodelfen. If you want to talk about a water elf, it's the Selfen or the Wolfelfen. And if you want to talk about a nightmare caused by an elf, it's the Elfadel. I'll put all of those words for you on my show notes at neilmac.me. Good luck with your elves. Next week I will be speaking to the ingenious epic fantasy author Charles Sterling, who's a young and witty author. He's the author of The Portal, and it's a tale about a guy who gets sucked into his TV screen. And he's also the author of Merge, which is about an experiment that goes disastrously wrong. So the magic and wisdom of the olden times, the old folk tales, impinges and it impacts on a modern technological world. Charles likes to subvert and repurpose old ideas, and he's highly inventive, so he's an interesting person to listen to. His full-blown novels are like cinematic blockbusters, but he also specialises in short stories and one-line vignettes. He chats to me on Myth and Magic about creating art and about how he comes up with fresh ideas and why short story writing is so good for you. So tune in next week for an interview with the fantasy author Charles Sterling.